There's a saying that exists amongst our species that is totally and 100% factually correct. We know more about space than we do our own oceans, and for good reason. Have you ever taken a look at what's down there? Someone tagged me in a tweet called like a wolf eel or something, and while not abysmally ugly as an anglerfish, truly one of God's mistakes, it's pretty close. Regardless of creatures that need to be nuked from existence though, the reality is our oceans, while having been mapped, only give us a topographical information as far as like what they look like. When it comes to what may live down there, it's a completely different story. In the events of Sweetheart, a boat ends up sinking with passengers scattered across the area. Seemed like a small boat, as I'm really kind of unclear how anybody got separated, but one woman finds herself alone on an island, thinking that she's relatively safe as long as she can keep her resource management game at top capacity. However, at night, something emerges from the waters to hunt her. Being much larger and stronger than Homo sapiens, it's absolutely horrifying what this thing does to people that it catches. So in today's episode, let's discuss the physiology of the monster in Sweetheart, its potential evolutionary origins, and why instead of trying to leave, Jen should have done the human thing and prepared for war. But before getting there, do you like movies? Well, if you do, then join our Discord as we do a movie night once a month, and I typically will cover the movie that we cover, so it's pretty fun. I actually have 100% rate on that. Also, thank you for the support on this channel as well as my literal gaming channel, Roanoke Games. It has been awesome to see. Like I think I've gotten like 3,000 subs inside of 3 weeks. It's been pretty sweet. So if you want to go check that out, have at it. But first, this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Go to incogni.com/Roanoke and use code Roanoke to get an exclusive offer of 60% off. That's incogni.com/Roanoke and use code Roanoke or click the link below to take your personal data off the market. All right, so you know what's annoying? People making money off your name and information alone while you sit there working for your hard-earned money like a normal non-turbo loser member of society. Data brokers hold onto your data, such as your full name, home address, gender, phone number, social security, and employment history, amongst other things, and then sell that information to other companies so that they can learn your habits and direct advertising to you. How does this happen? Well, let's say that you subscribe to a free newsletter and then also started searching for a medical case to confirm that I'm not completely cracked out during my biology discussions and videos, and then all of a sudden you now get targeted ads to you. They have your information now. Well, Incogni does the messy work for you. They contact these companies and ask them to delete the data that they paid for, which is pretty hilarious, which they are required to do by law upon request. To keep your data out of their hands and back in your control, you can use Incogni. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then by heading to incogni.com/Roanoke or using code Roanoke or clicking the link below, you can get 60% off. All right, let's get back to it. So we kick off our story with this being a Blumhouse Productions, so wear a helmet on this one. And actually, it was a pretty good movie, which is kind of engrossing. So as we move through the waters of Lake Minnetonka, or an ocean if you want to be technical about it, a woman is laying on the beach looking rather tired. Waking up coughing, she's saved. Or is she? She's not. It's gonna get way worse. Don't let the Paradise Bernier distract you. Running over to a guy named Brad, he got shanked by some coral, which is a tale as old as time itself, really. She calls out for a dude named Lucas, realizing that she's alone on the island with just this dude. Running his pockets, she begins dragging him up the beach as he wakes up. Looking at the wound, she calls out again, but nobody is there, gal, so stop calling out. She then rips the coral out, creating a wound that's even worse as he asks if she saw it. Now, you never know when you might need this information, and after all, this is a somewhat medical channel. How do you treat this wound? Well, being a former EMT myself, I'm gonna tell you, it ain't gonna be easy and probably won't work. But who knows? You might get lucky, and it's better off than not trying, right? Well, first off, don't try to remove the object like she did. It might be blocking some of the bleeding. Apply direct pressure to the wound, keep the person on their back, and cover them with a blanket, as it's gonna stop them from going into complete shock. Keep monitoring their vital signs, and do not give them food or drink or coconut water. You can comfort them, but really, it kind of becomes about just stabilizing the wound. Eventually, though, it'll become clear nobody is coming to kind of help you with anything, which at this point, you will have to intervene. You want to try to clean and irrigate the wound as best you can. Actually, seawater can sometimes be good for smaller wounds, but you need to understand there is a lot of bacteria in it. Clean the wound as best you can, and you need to get the blood out of the wound so that you can see what you're working with. If organs have been nicked, it's kind of just game over. This will lead to sepsis. You're not gonna be able to do anything. But if it hasn't and it's just muscle that's pierced and bleeding, then you can suture the wound together, but it's imperative to rinse the wound and remove any debris within it. The flesh also needs to be smooth, not jagged. If it's jagged, you're gonna have to kind of make it worse by cutting it away. So that is going to hurt. From here, you can stitch the wound if you have like dental floss. And I'm not gonna lie to you, this likely is well outside of a standard person's wheelhouse, but it basically revolves around removing any objects without causing further damage, cleaning the wound to see what you're working with, applying pressure, and suturing the wound back to prevent infection. Likely though, if you're on a deserted island, infection will happen and the person will not make it. But hey, It's worth a shot. So what Jin just did though, was remove the thing that was preventing him from bleeding out, which indicates he probably would have just bled out anyways at some point. But again, man and coral, the beef is long standing. So running into the jungle, she looks for water before finding a coconut, nature's water holder. I, for one, will always be paranoid about coconuts, given Chubby Emu's episode where a dude just drank some coconut water that he got out of a coconut. This is what happened to their organs. They shut down. And he didn't even make a recovery. It was wild. So breaking into the coconut, well, there goes all the milk. Nice. Like, that was literally all of it, I'm pretty sure. Running back to Brad, she then pours it into his mouth, but the dude has already bled out. Now there goes pretty much your one and only friend. Tragically, as it pans over the beach, we see no trash, which is actually kind of a love-hate relationship. On the one hand, it's horrible that beaches like this don't really exist anymore without trash because of all the crap our species produces, and it just ends up in the waterways. But on the other hand, the trash would be extremely helpful at this point. I actually watched an episode where one dude went on an island to show how to survive on deserted islands, and he found a bunch of unopened wine bottles and just bottles of water that had been washed up. It was absolutely wild. But that's neither here nor there. Gathering her bearings, she sees a hollow log, and as she continues her walk around the island, yep, it's one giant circle. Lots of calories used up there. Heading to the interior of the island, it's gotta be a sauna. And then coming across a bag and cooler, she calls out, judging by the bag though, and the pill she finds, this stuff has been here for quite a while. Also, that medication is, let me see if I can say this correctly, fluphenazine, which is for schizophrenia and hallucinations as well as delusions. Someone was on some pretty powerful stuff. Also indicating that this stuff has been here a while are just glass bottles of Coke. Grabbing a thermos, she smells it, no thanks. She then finds some old matches as well. Pretty lucky. Finding a tarp next to a book, it's clear that there was a group here at some point, probably some young adults trying to have fun on the island. Not on this creature's walks. This is basically the Jason Voorhees of lakes, except the ocean. Approaching the log next, she gets scared by Preach's parrot from Deep Blue Sea. Heading over to Brad, she then covers him up with some fronds, and yeah, that should totally take care of the smell that's about to happen. The sun then goes down as a storm rolls in, which is a good thing, as access to fresh water is now plentiful, as then she covers up and goes to sleep. The next morning, there are a ton of fish on the beach. Why exactly? Well, who's to say? But this does hint at what we will see later with this thing, an adaptation, if you will. Coming across a blackfin shark completely tore up, it's a bit alarming, but it does happen. As she begins cutting the fish apart, she needs a sharper rock, which means she has to invest some talents into the technology tree. Then heading back over to the beach, she starts going through her bag looking for her stuff as she realizes her entire journal has been waterlogged and now there is no record of her. It's like she never existed, but don't worry, the government will always remember you because you have taxes due. She then finds a picture of Lucas as she assumes he is donezo. Heading back to the interior of the island, she eventually finds what was left of the group. Shallow graves in the sand have been dug for WW and CW, potentially either siblings or married. I have no idea what their names actually are. Heading back out to the beach, Brad is starting to stink up the place as then she puts some fronds over him in a hole and then covers him up with sand. Honestly, you should have done that earlier so that you didn't have to touch him while his skin was gelatinous or whatever. It's not a word, but you get the point. Now that he's buried and taken care of, it's time for some whole fish fillet without any ability to wash your hands after what you just did. Tasty. So it's now the next morning as Jen starts her patrol on the beach, she finds Brad is back up and in the game. Either that or something dug up his shallow grave and ate him. Gonna go with option 2 on this one. You don't survive a coral gut stab after left in the sun for an entire day. So that's totally not ideal because that either means something is on the island with you or you are getting a taste for long pig at night and sleep eating. Checking the jungle and making a spear, which you do that anyways, that is some good old-fashioned human technology. She then lights a fire and gets ready to bed down for the night. Facing the tree line, she falls asleep but wakes up to tree branches snapping. As she sits there listening, nothing else happens. Heading into the water the next day, she spots something else is out there. So she swims over it, and why she's not wearing a life vest to swim out there is beyond me. I mean, if anything, that would just make it straight up easier to head out that far as you are way more buoyant. You save calories that way. But finding the luggage, she then looks down and spots a blue hole, possibly one of nature's most horrific holes. I'm sure there's a joke there somewhere. Heading back onto shore, she then raises the luggage and finds random bits of clothing that should come in handy to not burn up in the sun completely. Spending her third night out there, she then checks her match reserves and starting to look through pictures that were taken. As she does though, a plane can be heard flying overhead. Firing off a flare, that should have definitely been seen, but as the flare then lights and falls, however, it silhouettes. Good lord, what is that? Realizing a creepy weirdo is out there, she runs into the jungle to get away from that thing. Probably a good call. Grabbing her spear, she then hears twigs snapping as that thing clearly is in the jungle with her. Searching for her, it chitters and then finally walks off. Well, that could be a problem. Now, we don't see this creature for very long or very clearly, but given how far it is out in the water, this indicates one of two things, or just possibly straight up two things. First, this creature is very tall, likely around 7 feet or so, or about 2.3 meters. Either that, or it's incredibly accomplished as a swimmer and is able to maintain its ability to have like over half its body out of the water while swimming, which is not very easy to do. As we go along, however, we will see this creature may hint at where it comes from based on the movement and the bipedalism that it shows. So the next morning, she emerges from the jungle once more and looks through the pictures. She sees the woman as she placed her bag, but sees eyes in the background as well. Yeesh. Realizing that she needs to GTFO, she tries to put on a preserver in the luggage to make it float, but this plan goes over about as well as a wet fart in church. Getting frustrated, she abandons the idea and then heads back to shore. The plan now is to just straight up hide. Crawling into the bug alley log for the evening, the sun then sets, and the creature is back up on the shore looking for it. Evidently, this thing can track by smells because it approaches the log pretty quickly and then just starts beating the holy hell out of it, rolling it around, indicating that it is ridiculously strong. Emerging the next morning, I don't think that log has got another night in it. Heading out to the water, she then catches fish, as being hunted makes you very hungry. She smashes up the smaller fish to hunt the bigger fish. Seeing a shark, she spears that thing through the head castaway style, and remember to always account for refraction. The fish is never where you think it is actually, because like that light refracts where it is. It's usually like either like a foot away from that area. Basically, you gotta compensate. So digging a hole and covering it, she hides as she uses the shark as bait. Ooh-ha-ha. She closes her eyes for a second and then looks up and the shark is now gone. Exiting the hidey hole the next morning, she resharpens her spear as she sees someone taking a nap face down in the water. Turning him over, oh look, it's Zach. You don't know who Zach is, but I do. His legs are gone, which is a bit odd, and there are cut marks on his face. Also, a bit odd. Getting her next bait for the evening, she then raises him up in a tree and goes back to her hole to hide. Trying to stay awake, she looks out and then sees the thing emerge from the water. No thanks. It's bipedal and has arms just like you or I. It then drags Zach back to the water as planes begin flying overhead. You know, the famous nighttime search for survivors. This rustles the jimmies of the creature as Jen literally just almost stood up to fire a flare. Very lucky she didn't. But from here, we can begin ascertaining a few things about its biology. First, the creature walks on land like a regular man does. It has forward-facing knees, which we do, and it appears to walk on the balls of its feet rather than be flat-footed. However, as we will see later, the balls of the feet are actually a pretty standard practice for most bipedal animals. Basically, us. Once upon a time, actually, humanity, while being flat-footed, would also run on the balls of their feet. Now we have shoes that kind of absorb the impact, but this allowed for energy to be transferred into the Achilles tendon, and in turn allowed us to use much less energy to run, which is why we are persistent hunters. This creature appears to walk much like a man, which is highly interesting as there is a theory out there that we will discuss later. So as it chitters at the sky, it then runs back off into the water because it's a huge nerd. The next morning, Jen, understandably, wants to get off the ground. It was good enough for our ancestors, so it's probably good enough for us. Putting a hammock way up in the tree, she then lays down to see how good it is, and even still though, I feel like it could be higher up. As the sun then sets and another storm rolls in, she looks out to see if this thing is hunting, and then she spots it. It is, again, super tall. She lays back down as the creature is sniffing around for her. It chitters once more as it starts smacking the tree as she drops out of the hammock and then she runs for it. Here we see the creature quite clearly. It can hunt you by smell and is actually very effective at doing so. This highly developed sense is supported by the snout of this creature and appears that it may indicate it has a large olfactory bulb in its head, which of course is used to discern smells. Along with this, the nasal openings are quite large to be able to take in not just air, but also water. And this would be imperative in the water as, like with sharks, the sense of smell that they have is important for them to track blood. It's highly developed due to them needing to find animals either through vibrations of the water or, again, detecting the small amounts of blood, so this creature is likely no different. However, on land, the sense of smell is probably marginally diminished. However, it still appears that it can smell Jen, as made known several times when it stands next to the hole that she's in, approaches the log she was hiding in, and has now knocked down the hammock that she was in that she had made for herself. I would be interested to see how far exactly this sense of smell travels. Would standing downwind prevent it from being able to track you? Could going to the other side of the island actually be super helpful to think that it makes, or make it think you left the island? Anyhow, it begins chasing her as it dives into the water to keep up and then re-emerge. And this is because I believe it is not as effective at running on land as it is as hunting in water. It then squares up on her as she spears it, as then she starts getting tossed around like a baby in a dryer before the creature retreats due to its wounds. Huh, Must be French. She then climbs a tree and hides for the rest of the night, now realizing what she's dealing with. This creature clearly is an accomplished swimmer, as mentioned previously, and this would indicate that this species, while being able to dive into the water, can also still hunt on land though, but they prefer the water. And this may be why we also saw the fish earlier as they beach themselves trying to escape this thing. However, it now becomes a which came first question. Did this creature evolve completely separate from chasing fish up onto the shore, or did the fish beaching themselves become an evolutionary driving factor that made it eventually come up on shore, or could it just come up on shore to begin with from the start? I think there could be something kind of going on here that could be explained through a very old theory that we came up with as a species, but we'll get there. So heading into the healing waters of Lake Minnetonka once more, she cleans up before spotting a raft floating towards her. Swimming out without a life vest again, couldn't be me. A woman sits up in the raft as Lucas also emerges. So what were you guys doing in that raft together? So Lucas and Jin then hug it out as he says, "It's okay, I'm here now." Okay, bro, everything's all better. Having a team meeting about the place, Jen sort of activates my almonds here. You know, like in zombie movies, how people are completely nondescript about zombies and don't want to call them zombies, but we all know they're zombies? It's that type of feeling. She begins vaguely describing what happens, and I mean vaguely, saying it's big and it stinks. No. You know what you saw. It's a bipedal organism that uses the water to hunt and come up on land. It eats human remains, and you have actively fought with it. Show them your leg. But of course, because of her descriptive prowess, they just sort of don't believe her. Like, bro, this is not how humans talk and convey information, like, at all to someone. Let's say that I was on an island, right? And my girlfriend showed up in a raft. I'm literally making cave paintings of intricate detail as to why we have about 2.7 seconds to get out of there. Like, I'm straight up writing a dissertation on this weird fish face thing and how it's 7 feet tall. You have to tell people why it's worrisome, not just it's big and it stinks. So do the belly buttons of every contestant in My 600-Pound Life, but nobody's worried about that. We're not leaving deserted islands because of it. So the new recruits are not really worried at all about this thing out here and are more worried about getting back on the raft. Jin then talks about Zach washing up as the creature dragged him back out, which concerns the two as they just got there. How very interesting. What happened to Zach?
That's suspicious.
Did you guys do something to him? Maybe snacking on a manwich, perhaps? Jen then tells Mia that Brad is dead, and I'm assuming Brad is her boyfriend. She apologizes, but really all you did was tell the truth. Jen says he buried Brad, but the thing then came back for him. She shows the spear, saying the creature also bleeds black. But does it really? Let's discuss. There are a few reasons as to why blood would appear black, more so in the ocean, and they are as follows. The first is creatures such as brachiopods actually have black blood. Well, really, it's more copper-based blood called hemocyanin, which absorbs all colors except blue. However, if the blue is dark enough, it can appear to be black. Again, this is due to the differences between, like, say, us, which is iron in our own blood, being the basis for binding oxygen, and copper and brachiopods being the basis for binding oxygen. That said, there is another option which can produce black blood, and this is sulfhemoglobin. And this could indicate high levels of sulfur in the blood, which can make blood appear dark blue, green, or even black. However, typically this means that sulfur is preventing iron from binding to oxygen, which is not a good thing. So I'm more inclined to believe that this species would have a copper-based oxygen transport system, which now leads us to what this creature might be, but it requires a larger discussion of evolutionary traits gained over time. We all know brachiopods are quite intelligent. Octopus in particular are very intelligent, literally punching a fish out of frustration. That might not seem like much, but that level of irritation belies a higher intellect. Now, as we all know, they have tentacles rather than limbs, which would put this creature at a completely different morphology very clearly. The one part I have trouble rationalizing is the concept that this creature may have spawned out of brachiopods simply based on its blood, and for several reasons. While this creature is capable of existing on land for extended periods of time, and with brachiopods doing the same, it may seem like they are connected, but I seriously doubt it. And that's because of the formation of limbs that this creature has. The bipedalism displayed, the very clear endoskeleton supporting it on land, and the face shape. This would all indicate that this is not a brachiopod in the slightest and did not come from them. And now we have to rationalize why it has copper-based blood and why it appears the way it does. And for that, we need to see more of it, which will help clarify what it actually is. So as Mia and Jen sit on the beach talking about how being stuck on a raft for the first time, that's when she thought she was gonna meet her end, she talks about how there are no sounds out there either. Jen says that she would rather die on a raft than die here. Checking the flares, Jen then approaches Lucas, saying the planes all fly west and they need to head out that way. Lucas says he believes her, but it's a lot to process. I mean, if you say so. Jen then borrows the keys and knife from Lucas as Jen assumes they are leaving. So checking the knife, there's already blood on it as Lucas talks to me in the background. bit odd, isn't it? Chumming the waters, she then starts going to load the raft as Lucas says they aren't leaving. Mia says they need to rest as Lucas says Jin is just seeing things. I mean, they are correct. They should stay there, but obviously there is something that Jin is scared of. So as a fight breaks out, as Lucas says they need to at least stay one night to rest, Jin goes and hangs out in monster waters as Lucas adopts a stance of authority, hands clasped behind the back, which evidently is a subconscious stance that people take when they assume that they are in control of a situation. Is that true? I'm not 100% sure, but I did hear it from Dr. Philip Zimbardo, I think during his prison experiments, and someone's gonna tell me now that he's not even a real doctor like Dr. Phil or something. So while Mia and Lucas walk around, if they are so dead set on not leaving, what you could be doing is creating spears for everyone since they are set on the task of staying there, getting ready for a good old-fashioned 3v1 interaction. But instead, she just decides not to do that. Like seriously, if they don't believe you, fine. You don't believe me? Cool. Just go ahead and get the countermeasures ready so when that thing does inevitably come up on shore, you can take it out as a unit. Instead, however, she starts packing provisions to get out of there and then tries to steal the raft. She is almost immediately caught and then dragged back to shore with a head wound as she got knocked out by Mia during the struggle. So waking up that night, again, you should have just sharpened some spears and got ready. You could have done so much with 3 people. So then she's tied to a tree, which is not an ideal situation, as Lucas went to go take a look around, leaving Mia to watch Jin. Mia then apologized to Jin, as then Jin asks to be untied and looks out at the water. Mia says that, oh, we all feel guilty, we've been through something traumatic. No, Mia, you feel guilty. Lucas then returns to camp. He says nothing is out there. Jin says that they need to get out now, as Mia then walks off to give Lucas a chance to talk to Jin. So this conversation is just absolutely hilarious. He starts talking about how a black cloud is always hanging over her, and that she tried to break up with him while they were on vacation. Pro tip, if your significant other wants to split, let them go. Just walk away. Saves you a lot of stupidity down the line. Jin then keeps telling him there's no resting here. We will all be torn to pieces and dragged into the ocean. Mia, meanwhile, finds a fish head as something grabs her attention. Jin then asks what happened to Zach as Mia starts screaming as Lucas runs off to help. He hits the thing with a fire stick, not the Amazon one, but a real one, as it does virtually nothing but scares it. It then drops Mia, who is now bleeding after having her side bitten. Lucas then crawls over to Mia as she's dragged off by the creature into the dark depths. Bummer, bro. So now would be a very good time to make some spears. The next day, it's cloudy. Lucas stays up in a tree now, terrified as what's out there. They then start getting their stuff together to leave as Jin tells him there's nothing he could have done as they start getting ready to get out of there. Using the last of the matches, they gather up everything as Jin goes to check the bag and pill bottle to see if there's anything else that they can use. Loading up the raft, it's cloudy, which is a bit concerning to Jin because the thing doesn't come out during the day, but she doesn't really know if it comes out when it's cloudy. Pushing the raft into the water, they then kick their way out to the depths as they both jump in. Ready to set sail on a fun adventure, and there's actually a ton of blood in the raft. Zach totally got eaten here. I mean, hey, the sea be a cruel mistress, dry as a boat. Anyways, this is a well-known thing to do, is actually eat your crewmates. You don't want to go rafting with me. Listen, your hypothalamus shuts down, you draw a short straw. All I'm saying is, what is it? If you draw the short straw, I know there's an honor-based system where you gotta let people eat you, but all I'm saying is, let's pretend like it's a Noah's Ark scenario, right? And you're the 3rd chimpanzee. Like, no thank you. Anyways, drawing short straws, they eat the unlucky one as Lucas then paddles away from the shore and the creature swims just under him. Well, that's not an ideal situation, so it can come out during cloud cover. So the first thing that was super dumb, you could have easily launched on the other side of the island and given the large hidey hole that this thing lives in a wide berth. That way it wouldn't have known where you were. Instead, you decide to go over its home directly. So now it knows you're trying to escape. Again, a very non-human way of thinking. However, the cloud cover shows that this species is highly adapted to specifically the depths. And this is an important distinction to make as it also explains the blood that it has. Copper-based blood is actually more efficient at transporting oxygen molecules in cold or low oxygen conditions. Blue holes are interesting for this specific issue for several reasons, as they kind of create a microenvironment. Blue holes are formed through karst processes that require a specific type of topography. Rocks such as limestone, gypsum, and marble are soluble, and dissolution creates passages and cave systems underground. This process in combination with the Doline formation permits blue holes to actually be formed. What is also interesting is because of the warmer waters that surround them, you will have fish that have no interest in entering deeper waters. And this will create an area where there is actually not a lot of life. And this would be perfect for this creature, as creatures such as sharks could probably still eat this thing, but they would not enter this area, which is functionally the home of it, providing it a safe place to sleep. This creature intentionally chose this area that life was not, at least as prevalent, to sleep during the day, and this indicates a high level of intelligence and planning, which again hints at a larger frontal lobe. But the question becomes, where did this thing come from? Well, we are about to see it fully, and when we do, we will launch into that discussion. So, lunging at Lucas, they zip up the cover as it starts trying to get through the bottom of the raft. Scratching it, Lucas is distraught as he says, "Oh, I thought it wouldn't come out during the daytime." And he's not British. The head then emerges as they fire some flares straight into its face as its head gets stuck, as Jen gets grabbed through the bottom of the raft and then starts getting dragged down. Absolutely horrible. I imagine this is just what anglerfish do. Using the pocket knife, she stabs the creature as it nopes out of there. Lucas then jumps in to try to save her as it goes after him. Despite having the spear, he drops it as he's dragged down to a little place I like to call Humansville, Missouri. Why? I don't know. Returning to shore, the raft has also done the same. Jen now knows what she must do. Restarting the fire, she then writes a letter to anyone who finds it. She discusses the monster and how if they don't find her, then she thinks she's probably gonna just be in that hole in the water. Digging up the family from earlier, she uses their bones as pig stickers and starts building fires as a boundary. And now it's time for some good old-fashioned human on monster violence. The creature then emerges that night, searching for her once more. Walking through the jungle, it then finds a fish pile as she lights the fires, trapping it before running in predator style and stabbing it under the cover of fire. In the face of superior force, superior thinking wins, and brother, our frontal lobe is superior. She begins stabbing it, death by 1,000 cuts scenario, taking a few hits herself, but honestly it's going over pretty well. The creature is clearly distraught, which I also imagine, based on what we will see later, she used some of the pills to basically be ground up to try to knock it out. But now that we have seen this thing in all its glory, let's discuss its morphology for a moment. As we have already talked about this, it's kind of still worth mentioning. Starting with the feet, we see it does possess many of the structures humans have, which I believe is quite intentional. Moving up the legs, once again, forward-facing knees, making the leg digitigrade because it's walking on the balls of its feet, but still very human-like. The pelvis and angled femurs help aid in bipedalism, and as we move up to the abdominal area, we see the connection points to the legs are very similar. The chest is quite broad. The shoulders appear reinforced with padding on either side, along with the anterior deltoid muscles connected almost externally to the pectoral region. These would likely be extra muscle, and this will help it swim, which if you actually look at the chest, it kind of looks like Olympic swimmers. Basically, just really kind of wide at the top, but then it's like flat on the sides down. It's kind of interesting build, I guess you could say. So as we move down to the bicep and tricep region, we see they are quite large with powerful forearms. The hands of this creature possess 3 fingers along with 1 thumb on each hand. As we move up to the neck of it, it is massive, easily supporting the head. The head of this creature has a large predator mouth with several teeth and forward-facing eyes, which is the standard for predators as it provides binocular vision. The head has protrusions, potentially allowing for the flow of water, giving it the ability to turn quickly in the water by changing head position. It has rather large eyes with large pupils to allow in light, and it does not exist solely in the depths of the water, therefore eyes would still be quite necessary. It appears to be nocturnal as a hunter specifically, and may possess a tapetum lucidum, as seen in the picture earlier, which as we know reflects light back into the retina, allowing for better night vision. Basically think of cat eyes or dog eyes. So while this creature is rather large, the sun is undefeated in the parking lot. Because of its time evolving in darker areas of the ocean, it may be that this creature has lost the ability to deal with ultraviolet radiation, which causes it to burn in direct sunlight. However, as known with water, basically water provides protection from UV radiation of the sun, and on a cloudy day, it can emerge to hunt the waters during the day if it hears noises such as paddles. It will likely not risk going on land, however. So the question is now, where did it come from? I believe this to be a naturally occurring organism from Earth, like it's basically an Earth classic, originating from an idea that is now largely dismissed, but appears to hold some relevance in this movie. And this idea is known as the aquatic ape theory or aquatic ape hypothesis. It is essentially stating that humanity, as we were evolving into what we are now, according to the theory of evolution, we spent a considerable amount of time in water, going from erectus when we were hairier to sapiens when we were less hairy. Darker skin blocks sunlight in tropical waters, smooth skin and reduced body hair would allow us to glide through the water better. We are actually the best swimmer amongst all apes, our fat keeps us warm, and we have scooping hands and paddle-like feet, along with rare conditions of webbed toes. Our bodies are somewhat lithe and streamlined, and again, this is not really accepted now, but the idea is out there, and it's hard to deny that we definitely do have adaptations that allow us to swim better than any other ape. Which this brings us back to this creature essentially. While humanity collectively would leave the waters under this idea, which By the way, just because it's dismissed now does not mean there's no truth to the matter. In fact, a heliocentric model of our solar system was dismissed for hundreds of years. For reference, it would appear that this creature may have stayed in the water. While Homo erectus continued to evolve, this would create this creature. Homo erectus was actually also rather tall as well, at around 6 feet or about 2 meters, which was pretty big for an ape at this point. As it continued to change like sapiens would, this would eventually result in the adaptations that we see. It could hold its breath for much longer, existing in the waters to sleep much like a whale or dolphin would. It would then hunt at night, which is horrifying being in the water at night, and this might possibly have been for safety or ambush reasons. And it developed a larger body due to the colder waters over successive generations and lost all of its hair. Because of the colder and darker waters it existed in, this produced a white coloring and less ability to deal with the sun. And this would help to explain how it is able to emerge on land to begin with. Due to its bipedalism, air-breathing ability, and size, this would indicate it is a new addition to the ocean instead of coming from the ocean. Something like a lungfish, which is what we expect would come from an ocean, right? It can go up on the actual shore, but it returns to the water. But because it's a fish coming from the ocean, the fins would have needed to develop into limbs, and that would likely make it quadrupedal. Because of its bipedalism that already exists, this means that it came from land already and very likely came from primates, given its proportions and structuring concerning its limbs, hands, and legs. So I'm calling it Homo aquaticus. Why? Because much like whales that used to look like large wolves and then returned to water, so too did this primate. Of course, it must be relatively early or still regularly hunts on land, because otherwise these traits of legs and bipedalism would have started to evaporate a long time ago. So back to the movie. It actually gets a hold of her as she starts going absolutely ham on this thing, stabbing it. It begins a staggered walk as it's hurt and drugged. She runs off with it giving chase, as then she turns and it roars and then falls down, passed out. It appears to be asleep, as then she stabs it, finishing the job. And this gal ain't playing around. She does a smart thing. She goes for the double tap. Using a pocket knife, she then cuts off its head, ensuring it is not getting back up to come for her. And I appreciate the thoroughness of taking your adversary back to factory pre-assembly and keeping a trophy. So finally safe, she keeps the head, again, as a trophy, as she heads back to the raft with the forest on fire behind her, as quite literally, Subnautica music begins playing. Like, I am not even joking, it sounds exactly like it. And thus concludes Sweetheart. This presumed primate, based on the aquatic ape theory, is quite a strange creature. It does not appear that there are any of its kind actually still around. It may actually be the last, and she just decapitated it. Because of its location and temperature within, it had to adapt, developing copper-based blood to deal with the lower temperatures and probably lower oxygen environment, along with a hint of deep-sea gigantism, due to that being a more efficient metabolism associated with a large body size. This would ultimately allow for this creature to exist in lower, more frigid depths, but come up on land to hunt if necessary. However, it does not appear it can stay on land permanently and tires out rather easily, having to hold up its own body, as seen when it just gives up trying to get into the log to get to Jin. Ultimately, however, it really wasn't banking on the fact that Homo sapiens exists and this is our planet and it can catch these hands at any point in time. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. What do you think it is? An old form of undiscovered ape or possibly an alien? Let me know down in the comments. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Games, as well as Tail channel link in the description. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death Dancer, and Feather. Thank you guys. Next up, I'd like to thank our scientists, Argent Sentinel, Dakota 23, Lucian Dragon, Metric System, Scoot Boo, and Trash Panda in a trench coat. Thank you very much as well. And the rest of my patrons, y'all are greatly appreciated and are absolute ballers. All right, so that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.